So in the previous tutorial videos, we show you the data types for integer, string, and double. And in this one, we're going to show you a new data type called Boolean, which will be very useful for writing code involving if statements for branching conditions. Okay, that's something we'll show. But in this current one, we'll just focus on the basics. Let's create a new class in your Lab 0 Part 2 project. Let's create a new one. Right-click on the source and say New Class. And then let's call this Boolean data values. Let's say, well, Boolean data type. Boolean data type. Okay, and then we'll click on generate the main method here, and then we'll say finish. Okay, so let's build something very basic. So idea about the Boolean data type over here, I would say the Boolean data type consists of only two values, namely true and false. Only these two values. Let's say in the case of the integer, so what would be the possible value for an integer data type? You can be negative, minus, it can be -5, it can be +5, it can be 0, can be maybe 1355. So those are the values possible for the integer data type. And for the Boolean data type, it's very simple, only two possibilities, either true or false. Let's see how we can at least print them out. Okay, let's see how we can declare variable for Boolean data type. The syntax will be the same as how we declare variables for strings and integers. So this is a keyword you have to know in Java. You will say Boolean, okay, lowercase, all lowercase, B-O-L-E-A-N, Boolean. Okay, Boolean, and then let's declare a Boolean variable. Let's call that maybe a P, okay? And then it can be initialized to some value over here, okay? So there are two possible values you can write explicitly, okay? And, oh, by the way, I should really say more. True and false are the only two possible Boolean literals. Literal in the sense that we can write out the values explicitly. But later on, we're going to show you how you can actually somehow write expression that will actually evaluate into true or false. Okay, that's something that's more complicated, which we'll do in later videos. Okay, Boolean P will be, let's say, simply true. So you can see true is a keyword, all lower cases. Okay, so now you can say also Boolean, another variable, let's say Q, is assigned to false. Okay, so now we basically got two placeholders, P and Q. And for P, we can store Boolean values only. And for Q, we can also only store Boolean values. At the moment, P is storing true and Q is storing false. Okay, why don't we try to do a printout like this? You can say system.out.println. Okay, and then what I would do is I can say, for example, you can mix in the string and Boolean as well. You can say P is, okay, you can say P. Okay, again, the situation is very similar when you try to concatenate integer and also string together. So you can see this plus over here does not really mean addition. It means string concatenation. What Java would do is going to implicitly convert this Boolean value P over here into a string representation. In this case, it will simply just be true, and then concatenate true together with P is space. Okay, that's what it will do. Okay, and then we'll do something similar over here. So now rather than P, we can say Q is, and then we say Q. Okay, so now let's execute the code right away and see what happens. And then we can swap the values for P and Q. Okay, so now what we can do is we can say right-click on the class and say run as Java application. Okay, you can see P is true because we initialize that to be true, and also Q is false because we initialize that to be false. Okay, very simple. In some way, Boolean data type is much easier than string or than the integer data types because the Boolean data type contains only two possible values. Again, true and false. Okay, now let's try to do some very interesting changes. Okay, very simple ones. Let's say P happens to be true in the beginning. Why don't we simply say P is reassigned, okay? Because they are variables. It's reassigned to just false. And then Q is reassigned to true, okay? So what we are doing over here is we are trying to change the Okay, so now what I will do is I'll copy exactly the same 2 lines over here, and then I'll put them here. Okay, so now you can see used to be P is true, Q is false, but after the reassignments, we're gonna have P is false and Q is true. Okay, I'll draw some diagrams to show you exactly how they work. It's very simple to visualize, but I'll show you anyway. Okay, let's just do that. So what we'll do is we'll execute the program again. You can see over here, P is true, Q is false. These are the 2 print statements output. And then the next 2 over here, P is false and Q is true. That's the next 2. Okay, what you can do is you can just put a separator over here, system.out dot print line over here. You can say after reassigning P to false and Q to true. Okay, this is after. Okay, and of course make sure you don't have any typo. Now let's execute again, and then you will see even more meaningful outputs. Okay, you can see that this is actually the separator. Okay, so now let's understand this fragment of code by visualizing it. So let me take a snapshot and now move on to my iPad. Okay, let's just copy this fragment of code and then I'll paste it to my iPad. Okay, let's move on to my iPad, and then I'm going to just paste it. Okay. Okay, so this is the fragment of code that we just developed. So let's just try to trace it very quickly. Okay, so now let's imagine the red line is actually the flow of execution. Okay, so now in the very first line over here, what we're doing is we are declaring a placeholder, like a variable, with the name P of type Boolean. That means we can only put true or false inside this box. Okay. And now when we go to the second line over here, okay, we're declaring just another Boolean type variable called Q. Okay, and then of course we have Q over here. And by the way, of course, back in the first line over here, when we say initially P should be assigned to true, which means we put true inside this box over here. And in the second line, we put false over here. Okay, and then so when we move on to the next line over here, when we say system.out.println, and now imagine that this place over here is the console. Okay, let's say this is the console over here. So now as soon as we try to execute this particular line, we're going to say P is, okay, indeed, it's simply just true, whatever value that's inside. And then when we move on to the next line, what about Q? In this case, Q is stalling false. So we'll say Q is false. Okay, that's so far so good. And then of course we're going to print this line as well. Okay, so after reassigning whatever. Okay, and now let's go to this line here. So this line here is reassigning another value to P. Okay, you can think about this is called reassignments. For every variable, once you declare it, you can reassign for as many times as you like. Okay. So now, what about for this line here? When we say we want to reassign that to false, that means we're going to replace whatever value that is currently being stored, replace that by false. In this case, okay. And then this line, similarly, we're going to reassign Q to be true. So replace this one by true. Okay, so now we are basically trying to execute the same two lines over here. Okay, you can see these two lines are exactly identical. So now what about this line over here? So it's going to be retrieving the value for P. In this case, it's going to be false. So we're going to say P is false. Okay, and what about the last line over here? We're going to retrieve the value for Q. So that means Q is going to be true in this case, right? So we'll say Q is true. Okay, this is exactly the reasoning or tracing about how you got this particular console output as we show. Okay, so now let's do something a little bit also very interesting, and which is called relational operators. So in this current example, we simply just show you how you can use the literals for Boolean type true and false. But now we want to see how we can write out some useful expressions that will actually return or evaluate into some Boolean type values. Okay, what do I mean? Let's just simply create a new class to illustrate this. Let's right click on your project and say new and then class. So what I would like to do is I want to say relational operations. Relational operations. And remember in the class we talked about the difference between operation, operator, and operands. Okay, review these three terminology before you go on. Okay, so relational operations, and then click on the main method generation here and say finish. Okay, so this is the new class that we're going to focus on for now. Okay, relational operation is basically what you wrote back in the elementary school. Okay, very easy. So I'll give you one example right away. So Boolean, again, we can say P. So now rather than saying true or false, I can say P is assigned to, for example, 3 is less than 5. For example, right? We know that 3 less than 5 is the case. So that means it's going to be true. You can think about true value or the true literal in the Boolean type simply means something is the case. And the false Boolean literal simply means something is not the case. Okay? What can be one example? So now you can see that you can say Boolean over here, Q is assigned to, for example, 5 is less than 3. We know that the relational operator is not commutative, which means if you say x is less than y, it cannot be the case that y is less than x at the same time. Okay? That's what you learned back in the elementary school. Okay, you can say true over here because it is the case. Okay, you can say false over here because it is not the case. Okay, that's how you can understand true and false. Okay, let's print them out, and then I'll show you something more interesting. Okay, you can simply say system.out.println, and then we can say 3 less than 5 is, and then we can say P over here. You can also say over here 5 less than 3 is Q. Okay, that's also fine. Okay, so now let's see what's going to happen. Let me try to execute this block of code. So let me go back to Package Explorer and then right click on the class, and then I'll say run as Java application. Okay, it will say 3 less than 5 is true and 5 less than 3 is false. Okay, so now let's try to do something that's more interesting. You can see that over here the value for this Boolean variable P is kind of fixed. It's fixed to the relation between 3 and 5. And also the value for Q is also fixed between the relation of 5 and 3, right? But now we want to make it a little bit more flexible. What about we replace the left-hand side, the left operand, and the right operand to be some Boolean variable as well. Some integer variable. So that every time when we change, let's call this X, and let's call this Y. So every time as we change the value for X and Y, the relation is going to be changed accordingly. Okay, let's see how we can do that. Okay, so now, by the way, let's move on to a new class to actually show you for clarity. But now, what you can do as an exercise by yourself. Okay, so what are the other relational operators? Okay, so now this will be exercise for you. Okay, let me just do the multiple line. So you can / enter. Okay, so now these will be the exercise for you. Try other relational operators. Okay, for example, you have so let's enumerate all the relational operator. You have less than or equal to, larger than or equal to. Okay, so these are the 4 relational operators, and also one more thing. Also equals is simply means equality for mathematical equality, and a very common confusion. Common confusion is equal sign. A single equal means assignments. For example, when you say x equals y, means assign y to x. Okay, equals means equality. For example, if you say P equals Q, means P's value is equal to Q's value. Okay, well, let's just do one more example to illustrate this. For example, you can say system.out dot println. Over here, you can say 3 equals 5. Okay, and then is plus. Okay, so now over here, you can actually put it in parentheses. You can say 3 equals 5. And apparently this is not the case, so that should be false. Okay, let's verify that. Okay, 3 equals 5 is false. So now again, you want to always remember, if you want to do a comparison to either get a true or false, and you will have to use double equal. If you want to change the value for some variable, you have to use single equal. So they means something completely different. Okay, that's something you want to keep in mind. Okay, that's relational operations. Why don't we just rename that to be relational operations 1? Okay, so you can right click on the class over here and say refactor rename. Okay, and then you simply just have to say relational operations 1. Okay, hit enter, and then it will just say continue. Okay, so now what we'll do is we're gonna create another class called relational operations 2, and I'll show you something that's a little bit more interesting, making use of variables. Okay, so now let's right click on the project, and then we're gonna create a new class called the relational operations 2. Relational operation 2. Relational operation 2, and then with the main method here. Okay, it should be operations, right? Okay, let's be consistent. Okay, again, of course, I can right click on the class and rename it. That's not an issue. Okay, I can say relational operations 2. Okay, finish. Okay, let's see how we can play with the relational operation. I'll show you the example directly, and then for the tracing, I'll leave that to you because I just did it for the simple case, and now you should be able to do it by yourself. Okay, so now what I would do is, let's say integer x, okay, is assigned to 3. Let me say just use a different value. What about 23? Integer y is assigned to, let's say, 23 as well. Okay, what about your 23 and 23? Okay, they're the same. Okay, so now I'm gonna print out all the various results, either true or false, for the relational operators, for the relational operations. So now I'm gonna say system.out.println. Just be ready to do some copy and paste in just a moment. I would say x equals y is I can say colon maybe. And then I can simply say parentheses over here, okay, x equals y. Okay, in this case, we know that it should be true because 23 equals 23 will be true, okay? And we're gonna do all the various relational operations. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, okay? So what I would do is I would say less than or equal to, let me just say less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, greater than, okay? And then, of course, make sure this one is doing the correct corresponding stuff, less than or equal to, and also over here, we're gonna say greater than or equal to, and over here, we will say greater than. Okay, let's anticipate what the result would be, okay? So this is as if we are trying to do 23 equals 23. That should be true, right? And also 23 less than 23. We know that it's not the case, so that should be false, okay? And now over here, that should be 23 less than or equal to 23. As you can see, in this case, we do consider the possibility of equal. That means 23 is equal to 23. So this should be true, okay? And then we say 23 larger than or equal to 23. In that case, that should be true as well. And also 23 larger than 23, that should be false. Okay, hopefully you're okay mathematically speaking. So now let's execute the code and verify that. And then I'll do something interesting. Okay, so right click on this class over here and say run as Java application. Okay, so that's exactly what we just predicted. Let's just make sure you understand that. Okay, so now, so now let's do the following. Okay, what we want to do is we want to reassign both x and y to something else. And then we're going to copy and paste exactly these lines of code and see how they might have changed. Okay, that's what we'll do. So now let's see exactly what's going to happen. Okay, by the way, I'll just make a note. So it's true, and now we know that this should be false, and we know that this should be true, and also this should be true, and this should be false. Okay, let's just make a note. So now what I will do is, I will first of all try say x is reassigned to, let me just say 56. Okay, it's reassigned. So x is no longer 23 at this point. It's being reassigned to 56. Okay, and then y is reassigned to something bigger. For example, let's say 89. Okay, 56 and 89. So now the relationship between x and y has been changed because x and y are variables. We just reassign them so that now they are no longer equal to each other. Okay, x basically is strictly less than y. So now what we're going to ask you about is, let's predict what's going to happen. If we simply copy and paste the same block of code over here, what's going to happen? Okay, so that means whenever we talk about x, it's going to be 56. Okay, let me just copy and paste very quickly. So we talk about 56 being on the left hand side throughout. 56, 56, and also 89 will be the right hand side. So 89, 89, 89, 89, and 89. Okay, so now 56 equals 89 should be false. 56 less than 89 should be true. Okay, we know that this should be true, and this one should be false, right? Because 56 is not larger than 89, and so 56 is also not equal to 89, right? And 56 larger than 89, that should also be false. Okay, let's verify this. Okay, so now what? Let me just make it a little bit better for you. Okay, so what we can do is we can say system.out.println. Okay, after reassigning x to 56 and y to 89. Okay, and then over here as the first line, what we can say is, we can say after initializing x to 23 and also y to 23. Okay, just make it more readable for the output. Okay, let's now verify the output. Okay, so now what we will see is, okay, you can see that, okay, it's false, true, true, false, and false. Okay, that's exactly right. Okay, and this particular block of output is different from this particular block of output, even though they are produced by two blocks of code over here that are completely identical. The reason is, you can see the x and y over here, they're simply just variables. So when you try to execute this block of code, you're executing them on the basis that x and y are both 23. And when you are executing this block of code, even though they're identical, but it's on a different basis, in which case x is 56 and y is 89. Okay, so please make sure you understand that. Let's do one more thing. So now we have handle where x and y are equal, and also x is less than y. Why don't we try x is larger than y? Okay, so now why don't we try x is reassigned to 101, and y is assigned to, let's say, 48. Okay, now so it's a different relation. And then what I will do is I'm going to copy and paste this block of code. So now, and then I also need to need this. Okay, let me just cut that line over there. Just paste it up right after that. Okay, and also I'm going to copy this line here and then put it here. After reassigning x to 101 and y to 48. Okay, so now that means 101 is now the left hand side for every relation over here. It's the left operand. And now 848 becomes the right operand for every relation over here. Okay, let's predict what the result will be, and then we'll verify that by Eclipse. 101 equals 48, apparently false, and 101 less than 48, apparently that's false. Okay, and now less than or equal to it's neither less than nor equal to 48, so that should be false. And 101 larger than or equal to 48, yes, it is larger than that, so you can say true. And also 101 larger than 48 should be true. Okay, that's what we predict. Let's try to execute that and see if that's the case. And now you can see that we have false, 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 true, true. Okay, so the value for this particular example is we are really trying to show you exactly how you can use the relational operator, okay, to compare, to see what the relation is between two numbers. Okay, so especially when the two numbers are actually variables, depending on what exactly the value is, the relation might either be true or false, depends. Again, specifically before you end this tutorial, I would say compare, for example, let's say line number 8, line number 16, and line number 24. Okay, you can see 8, 15, and 24. These three lines of code are exactly identical. However, they return different result: false, false, and also true. The reason is, at the time we try to execute this line here, at the time we try to execute this line here, and at the time we try to execute this line here, the corresponding values for x and y are simply just different, as I try to highlight over here, okay? And a similar argument applied to, for example, line number 9, line number 17, and also line number 25, etc. Okay, that's a really important remark for you to understand.